On a stormy night, an elderly woman clutched her tiny granddaughter as she ran for her life, desperate to escape the cold-blooded gang hunting them down. Just when her strength was about to break, a white SUV pulled up beside her and a stranger's voice called out, "Get in." She didn't know who he was, or that the moment that door opened, a new door to hope would open too, one that would change their lives like a miracle. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain came down in violent sheets, turning Edgewater District into a maze of slick pavement and trembling neon reflections. Streetlights flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. Marjorie Smith clutched little Kayla to her chest, her arms shaking, her breath catching and breaking with every desperate step. Pain pulsed along her ribs, old woman bones meeting fresh bruises, and each inhale tasted like metal and storm water. Behind her, heavy footsteps slammed against the soaked concrete. Voices followed, rough, coarse, drunk on cruelty. "Keep moving," one barked. "She ain't getting far in that rain," another yelled. The sound chased her, crawled up her spine, coiled around her throat. She pulled Kayla closer, the child's small hands knotting into her shirt, her tiny face buried against Marjorie's collarbone, trembling. They had been running for what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes. The rain distorted time, so did fear. Jeremiah should have been here. He should have been the one carrying his daughter, shielding her from monsters. But he died under the weight of a debt that should never have existed. A debt he tried to pay, each grueling night, until exhaustion and bad luck stole his life on a rain-slick road, not unlike this one. Marjorie paid the legal part, all of it, every cent, but Red Jackals didn't care about legality. They cared about leverage, and tonight, leverage meant Kayla. Leon Vance's voice cut through the storm like a blade. "Marjorie," he roared, close enough she could hear the spit in his throat. "The kid is our property." That word property burned hotter than the pain in her ribs. It made her legs move even when her body begged her to fall. She stumbled, caught herself, pushed forward. Her heart wasn't beating anymore. It was pounding against time, against darkness, against destiny. Edgewater's infamous neon blur shimmered through the storm, and for a split second, she thought she was hallucinating the shape ahead. A tall white Land Rover parked beneath a flickering street lamp, its engine off. Someone inside. Someone who didn't belong in this neighborhood, not at this hour, not in this kind of rain. She didn't think. She couldn't think. She just ran. Her feet slapped water. Her grip tightened on Kayla. She threw her free hand out and pounded on the window, leaving streaks of red diluted by rain. Inside, a young man looked up sharply from a stack of documents. Clean shirt, sharp jawline, pale skin, startled eyes, completely out of place in Edgewater's midnight alleyways. For a heartbeat, the world went silent, except for the rain drumming on metal. He blinked once, confusion slicing across his face, then instinct, some inner switch clicked on. Nathan Ward rolled the window down only an inch, just enough to see her eyes and the terror drowning in them. She couldn't form words. She didn't need to. He'd already read the entire story in her breathless trembling. His voice, when it came, was calm in a way that felt impossible against the chaos around them. "Get in. Now." She didn't hesitate. She yanked the door open, nearly collapsing inside with Kayla still clenched between her arms. Nathan slammed the lock button just as Leon Vance reached the hood of the car. Leon's fist hit the window with a bone-jarring thud, his face twisted in fury, rain sliding off him in sheets. Nathan stared through the glass, cold, collected, resolute, before shifting the gear with one swift, decisive motion. The Land Rover lurched forward, tires spraying water as it cut through the storm, leaving Leon shrinking in the rearview mirror, still screaming into the rain. Inside the car, Marjorie tried to breathe, but her lungs refused to settle. Kayla whimpered softly, clutching Nathan's sleeve now without realizing it. Nathan didn't pull away. His knuckles tightened on the steering wheel, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the road ahead, on getting them away, on getting them safe. Marjorie didn't know who he was. She didn't know why he stopped, or why he helped. But for the first time that night, hope flickered, small, fragile but alive. And that was enough to keep her breathing. The storm swallowed the city behind them as Nathan pushed the Land Rover through the wet haze. Marjorie held Kayla in her lap, rocking her instinctively, whispering little prayers she barely remembered the words to. Nathan didn't speak, not yet. He drove with this unsettling calm, the kind that came from someone who'd learned long ago how to quiet storms inside himself, long before facing any outside. The wipers sliced the rain in steady rhythms. Marjorie finally dared to look at him. His jaw stayed tight, his breath slow. He wasn't just driving. He was processing something. And whatever it wasn't indifference. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was quiet but certain. "You're not going home tonight." She swallowed hard. "I don't have a home safe enough to go back to." Nathan didn't answer, but his hand tightened on the wheel, as if that single sentence confirmed something he already suspected. He turned down a side street, away from the traffic, away from danger, stopping beneath a sign lit softly in blue: Ward Community Clinic. A private building. Modern glass, too clean, too new, too safe for a woman who'd been running in the rain minutes ago. He stepped out first, scanned the surroundings with an instinct that felt practiced, then opened her door. "Come on, they'll take care of you inside." Inside, warmth wrapped around her instantly. Clean air, bright lights. A nurse hurried over, eyes widening when she saw the bruising on Marjorie's cheek and the way Kayla wouldn't unclench her fists from Nathan's sleeve. "Let's get them inside," the nurse whispered, and something in her tone told Marjorie this wasn't the first time Nathan had brought in someone in trouble. While the staff checked her vitals, Nathan stood near the doorway like a silent guard, not hovering, not intruding, just there. Solid, unmoving, present. Kayla wouldn't stop staring at him, her eyes wide, her tiny hand still tangled in the fabric of his jacket. It took a nurse 3 tries to gently peel her away. When the examination ended, Nathan walked over, voice steady. "Who were those men?" The question wasn't an interrogation. It was preparation. For what? She didn't know. She hesitated. Then the truth came spilling out. Jeremiah's debt, the payments she made, the illegal interest, the threats against Kayla. She hadn't told anyone the full story before. But now, with this stranger, the words poured out as if fear itself needed a witness. Nathan didn't interrupt. He didn't tell her he was sorry. He didn't offer false comfort. He simply listened, and that somehow felt like the first safe thing that happened all year. When she finished, she expected him to step back, to say something cautious like "let the police handle it," or "you need to move out of town." Instead, Nathan inhaled once, slow and deliberate, like someone bracing his feet before lifting a weight. "All right," he said. "You're not going back to Edgewater tonight, or tomorrow, or any time until this is handled." Her voice cracked. "I can't pay for." "You're not paying for anything," he said, tone leaving no room for argument. "Come with me." She didn't know where "with me" meant until she saw the car pull into a quiet modern building with a metal sign glowing above the entrance. Beacon Suites, a place so secure looking it could have belonged to diplomats. "I booked you a room, under an alias," Nathan said. "Security here is tight. Nobody gets in without approval." He walked her and Kayla inside, carrying the small bag of supplies the clinic had given her. Inside the suite, the lights were soft, the air warm, the bed neatly made with fresh white sheets. A tiny stack of children's clothes sat beside folded pajamas on the dresser. New. Tags still attached. Kayla spotted a plush sunflower on the pillow and reached for it with both hands. "You bought this?" Marjorie whispered. "I didn't know what toys she liked." Nathan replied simply, "So I picked something cheerful." He checked the windows, the locks, the peephole, the emergency exits, things no ordinary stranger would think about. Then he stepped toward the door. "Rest tonight, I'll take care of what comes next." She froze. Why are you helping us? You don't know us." He paused, his hand rested on the doorknob, his shoulders rising and falling with a subtle breath. "You needed help," he said quietly. "And I was there." Then he left, the door clicking shut with a finality that filled the room with an unfamiliar sensation. Not fear, not danger, something closer to safety, or the fragile beginning of it. Kayla crawled onto the bed with the plush sunflower, curling into its softness as if it were the first warm thing she'd touched all night. Marjorie sank into the chair by the window, her ribs aching, her skin bruised, her heart exhausted. Outside, the rain still hammered the city. But for the first time since Jeremiah's death, she exhaled without listening for footsteps behind her. She whispered a thank you, to God, to the storm, to whoever guided that white Land Rover into the right place at the right time. Because tonight, a stranger opened his door. And with it, the first crack of safety found its way into her life. The rain finally eased by morning, but inside the Beacon suite, the storm still lived in Marjorie's bones. Kayla slept curled against her hip, clutching the sunflower plush. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the heater and the soft rustle of hotel sheets. It should have felt peaceful, it should have felt safe, but safety felt foreign, like a language she hadn't spoken in years. A gentle knock sounded. Just one, not the frantic pounding of last night's terror. Nathan's voice came through the door, measured and low. "It's me." When she opened it, he stood there holding 2 cups, one steaming with tea, the other with something he guessed Kayla might like. His shirt from the night before had been replaced by a simple gray sweater. He looked different in daylight somehow, less like a stranger, more like someone whose edges softened around children and bruised old women. Kayla woke slowly, blinking at Nathan with that quiet caution kids develop when the world's already proven itself cruel. He handed her the warm cup with 2 hands, as if afraid to startle her. "It's cocoa," he said gently. "It's not hot, just warm." Kayla sniffed it, decided she approved, and sipped. That tiny act, trusting someone new, hit Marjorie in the chest, hard. Nathan sat down in the armchair across from the bed, giving Marjorie space but not distance. He didn't ask questions yet. Instead, he waited, letting her settle into the moment, and somehow, that patience broke the dam more effectively than pressure ever could. She began quietly. "Jeremiah wasn't supposed to leave me this early." Nathan lifted his eyes, just slightly. Enough to show he was listening, really listening. She told him about her son's late shifts, about the exhaustion that clung to him like another skin, about the debt he inherited from a business that died long before he did. She told him about the accident, the late-night call from the hospital, the way the world tilted and never fully returned to center. She spoke slowly, voice cracking at odd intervals, as if the pain slipped through before she could stop it. Nathan didn't look away, but he didn't smother her with sympathy either. He absorbed each detail with a steady, quiet gravity, like someone who'd learned long ago that the worst stories need space to be told. "And now," she whispered, looking down at Kayla, "she's all I got left." Kayla crawled into Marjorie's lap, pressing her face into her grandmother's shoulder. Nathan watched the two of them, and something shifted in his expression, softening first, then tightening into something like protectiveness. A beat passed, something unsaid hovered between them. Marjorie felt it first, a tiny flicker of curiosity. "What about you, son?" she asked softly. "You act like someone who's seen trouble before." Nathan's eyes flickered away for the first time. A small thing, but telling. The room went still. Kayla looked up at him, her big brown eyes unblinking. Children knew when adults carried invisible wounds. Nathan exhaled slowly, the breath long and controlled. "My mother died when I was 7. The sentence dropped into the air like a stone into deep water, quiet but heavy. Marjorie's heart clenched. She hadn't expected him to share anything. He continued, voice low, steady but fragile around the edges. "My father didn't know how to be one. He buried himself in work. Shut down. I grew up in a house where silence was normal, where nobody reached for anybody." He paused. "I guess I learned early how to function without a family." The look in his eyes, just a flash, told Marjorie everything she needed to know. This man understood loss not because he'd seen it, but because he'd lived inside it. Kayla's small voice broke the quiet. "Were you scared?" Nathan didn't answer at first. His throat worked. Then yes, a lot. Kayla nodded like she understood fear better than most 4-year-olds should. She slid off the bed, walked to him, and rested her little hand on his knee. No words, just a child's instinct to comfort. It startled him. Not the touch itself, but how fast he reached his hand up, covering hers gently, like he'd been missing the feel of small fingers for decades without knowing it. That simple moment, the three of them in a hotel room sharing stories and scars, felt like an invisible thread stitching itself quietly between them. Not a family, not yet, but something beginning. Before Marjorie could speak again, Nathan straightened, that controlled calm sliding back into place. "I'm going to help you," he said. "Not just tonight, until this ends." His certainty carried weight, not born from bravado, but from a man who'd finally found something worth stepping into the storm for. And for the first time since her son's death, Marjorie felt the faint, trembling ripple of something she'd lost a long time ago: faith. Not in luck, not in miracles, but in people. By the second evening, the city felt quieter, but only from the outside. Inside the Beacon suite, the calm felt brittle, like thin ice waiting for the wrong step. Marjorie could finally breathe without her chest tightening. Kayla drew pictures using the crayons the clinic had given her, pressing them harder than most kids did, as if coloring could keep the world from breaking again. Nathan stopped by just after sundown, carrying a plain brown folder tucked under his arm. He didn't say much at first, just checked the locks, scanned the hallway, and spoke briefly with the concierge about the building's access list. Marjorie watched him from the sofa, Kayla leaning against her side, tracing circles with her finger around Marjorie's palm. Nathan wasn't a man who wasted motion. Every step he made had purpose, every glance held calculation. But beneath that, hidden under the steady exterior, Marjorie noticed something new: a thin line of tension along his jaw, a heaviness behind the eyes. Something had shifted. He sat opposite them and opened the folder. "I talked to a lawyer," he said quietly. "And the police, they're aware of the road gang, Red Jackals, but they've never had enough proof to act. Too many people scared to testify, too many cases dropped." Marjorie swallowed, because she knew the pattern. The fear, the silence, the way injustice repeated itself when power belonged to the wrong people. But Nathan continued, "They know about Leon, and about the threats." He paused. "They're watching now." It sounded like good news. It should have been good news. But then his voice shifted, just enough to make the hairs on Marjorie's neck rise. "There's something else." He placed a piece of paper on the coffee table, a photograph. Blurry, taken from a street camera, but recognizable: Leon, standing outside the Beacon Suites, from only 2 hours earlier. Marjorie felt her stomach drop. Kayla had stopped drawing. She stared at the photo, her little hands trembling. "Grandma, that's the bad man." Her voice wavered in that tiny soft way that made grown adults crumble. Nathan leaned forward immediately. "He didn't get inside," he reassured her softly. "He can't." Security stopped him before he reached the door. "But he found us." Marjorie whispered it, not to Nathan, not even to Kayla, but to the part of her heart that had been holding on by threads. "He found us again." Nathan didn't tell her she was wrong. He didn't dismiss the fear. Instead, he met her eyes with something steadier, heavier, and far more human than certainty. "I won't let him near you again." Marjorie studied him for a long moment. Not because she doubted him, but because promises like that felt dangerous. People made them all the time. Few could ever keep them. Nathan stood, pacing once as he considered the next step. "I'll bring in private security," he said. "People I trust. You won't be alone here." Not for a second. Marjorie blinked. "Private security. Nathan, you don't need to go through all that for your safety," he interrupted gently. "I do." But beneath the firmness, there was something else, something quieter, a piece of him he didn't let people see. The same piece that had cracked open when Kayla asked if he'd been scared as a child. That part of him wasn't just being protective, it was remembering. Before Marjorie could respond, his phone buzzed on the table. Nathan checked the screen, and his entire posture changed, straightened, sharpened. He didn't show the message, but he didn't need to. His expression revealed enough. "Leon's not acting alone," Nathan murmured. "Someone else is moving pieces behind him." Marjorie felt cold settle into her bones, deeper than the stormy night's chill ever had. "Someone else? What do you mean?" Nathan hesitated only 3 seconds, but that hesitation spoke more than words. "Red Jackals aren't smart enough to chase interest numbers or debt contracts. They're muscle, someone bigger. Someone with money is backing them. And that someone wants the debt collected. Marjorie closed her eyes tight. She didn't have the strength to hear a new name. A new threat, but she needed to. Who? She whispered. Nobody confirmed yet, he said, but the lawyer thinks it might be Morgan Hale. She didn't know the name, but the look on Nathan's face told her she should be afraid of it. Kayla slid closer into her grandmother, sensing the fear even without understanding the words. There was a long silence. Then Nathan's phone buzzed again, this time louder, vibrating against the wooden table with an unsettling urgency. He picked it up, eyes flicking across the screen. Then he froze. Marjorie's voice trembled. "Nathan, what is it?" He turned the phone, showing her the message. It was a number she didn't recognize. A burner phone. The message said only one thing: pay what's due, or the kid goes first. Marjorie felt the room tilt, her breath hitched hard enough to hurt. Kayla whimpered, burying her face into Marjorie's side. Nathan immediately knelt beside them, his voice low but fierce. "He won't touch her. Do you hear me? Not while I'm breathing." For the first time, his calm cracked slightly, not from fear but from something deeper, something personal, something old, and Marjorie recognized it instantly. He wasn't just protecting them, he was fighting ghosts. Nathan stood again, pulling his phone to his ear, his tone shifting into something firm enough to cut through walls. "Jack, it's me. I need you and Hannah at Beacon Suites within the hour. Bring the equipment, all of it." There was no hesitation on the other end. Within the time it took Kayla to drink half her cocoa, a knock sounded at the door. Not frantic, not aggressive, 3 firm knocks, spaced evenly. A pattern. Nathan opened it to reveal 2 people, Jack McKinley, broad-shouldered, steady gaze, ex-police from the look of him. Hannah Lee, sharp eyes, posture straight, every movement precise. Neither asked questions. They walked the perimeter, checked windows, tested locks, set up camera devices with the ease of people who'd done this more times than they could count. Jack paused in the living room, scanning the exterior through the curtains. "You weren't exaggerating," he murmured. "Someone's watching." Hannah set down a small device near the door. Motion sensor, alerts directly to Nathan's phone. Nathan nodded. "I want shifts, no gaps." Marjorie watched the 3 of them coordinating, like a small unit accustomed to crisis. She didn't understand how Nathan had access to people like this. She didn't understand why a man who seemed to live a quiet, ordered life would have a network built for danger. But as she studied him, hands steady, posture anchored, voice controlled, she realized something. This wasn't new for him. This wasn't unusual. He knew exactly how to protect people, and he knew exactly what kind of darkness he was dealing with. Marjorie's voice broke softly. "Why are they doing this? I paid the legal part. I did everything right." Nathan's expression softened, one of the rare moments when his guard slipped completely. "You did everything you could," he said. "But people like Hale, they don't want fairness. They want power. They want to break people who can't fight back." His jaw tightened. "And I'm not letting him do that to you." For a moment Marjorie didn't speak. She studied him carefully. The young man with the heavy calm, the man who stepped into her nightmare without hesitation, the man who stood between a child and danger without needing a reason beyond humanity. "You fight like someone who lost something," she whispered. Nathan didn't answer, not verbally, but the flicker in his eyes was enough. He had lost something. Years ago, and now, protecting Marjorie and Kayla felt like a fight he wished someone had fought for him. Outside the window, a car rolled slowly past the building. Jack noticed it first. Black sedan, same plate as last week's case. Nathan moved to the window, his breath tightening just slightly. Red jackals, watching, waiting. The threat wasn't gone, it was closer than ever. And yet, inside the Beacon Suite, something stronger than fear began to form. Not safety yet, not certainty, but a promise. Nathan wasn't leaving. Jack and Hannah weren't leaving. And Marjorie, despite the trembling, felt a fragile thread of belief winding its way into her lungs. For the first time since Jeremiah's death, she wasn't outnumbered, she wasn't alone. The morning after the security team arrived, Nathan drove to Ward community offices with a folder under his arm and something sharper buried behind his eyes. He had spent most of the night pacing the suite's hallway, stopping only when Kayla fell asleep on the couch with her sunflower plush resting on her chest. The moment he saw her breathing steady, something inside him shifted. The problem was no longer just about debt collectors. It was about the kind of men who hunted children. By the time he reached the office, Nathan's mind was already spinning through every angle. The building was sleek, all glass and steel, his father's legacy, not his. Nathan preferred the clinic, the outreach centers, the parts of the foundation that actually touched people, but the offices were where the paper trail lived. The shadow of the Ward name gave him access to information most people never saw. He headed straight to the legal department, where Miss Carver, the foundation's lead attorney, was sorting through stacks of documents with the precision of a surgeon. She barely looked up until she saw Nathan's face. "Something happened," she said immediately. Nathan laid the folder on her desk and opened it. "This woman, Marjorie Smith. Her son owed a legal loan, paid it. Everything above that is extortion." Carver flipped through the papers. "Red jackals," she muttered. "They've been on our radar for years. Small enough to stay under federal attention, brutal enough to scare locals into silence. Who funds them?" Nathan asked. Carver paused, tapping her pen. "That's the real question. Their financials don't add up. They're too organized for a street crew. Someone with money is behind this." Nathan already knew the name. He'd heard it whispered around donors' tables, spoken in tones that suggested wealth dressed in respectability while stepping over bodies in the dark. "Morgan Hale," he said quietly. Carver's eyes lifted sharply. "If Hale is involved, this isn't just a debt dispute. This is a corporate shell funneling money into predatory lending. And he's coming after a 4-year-old. Nathan replied, his voice tight. Carver leaned back, exhaling slowly. "We need hard evidence, not rumors, not intuition. Something that sticks." Nathan's hands curled slightly at his sides. "Find it." Carver studied him for a moment, really studied him. She had known him since he was a teenager who barely spoke a sentence during board meetings. This Nathan was different. This Nathan had fire. "Give me 24 hours, she said. "I'll dig." A beat. Then she added quietly, "You look tired." He didn't bother denying it. "I didn't come here to rest." As he walked out of the office, another idea sparked, one he hadn't allowed himself to consider until now. If Hale was involved, then someone within the financial districts had to be enabling it. Nathan headed to the foundation's data analysis floor, where screens glowed with numbers, maps, patterns. Leo, one of their top analysts, spun his chair when Nathan approached. "Morning. Wow, okay. You look like you haven't slept since the Cold War." "Narrow this," Nathan said, placing another folder on the desk. "Cross-reference Red Jackal's movements with Hale's known businesses." Leo raised a brow. "You think he's funding them?" "I think he's hiding behind them," Nathan answered. Leo slid into focus, fingers flying across his keyboard. Lines of data streamed across the screen. Financial transfers, land deeds, coded checks, shell corporations. Nathan hovered behind him, hands pressed into the table, his jaw tightening with each new connection forming on the display. 3 minutes later, Leo frowned. "That's interesting." "What is?" Leo pointed to a timeline. "Every time Red Jackals increase pressure on someone, more threats, more visits, Hale's property acquisition spike. It's like he uses the jackals to push people into default, then buys their homes for pennies." Nathan felt heat rise in his chest. Marjorie's neighborhood. Leo clicked again. 3 houses on her block, all bought by Hale's company in the last 8 months. There it was. The pattern. The motive. They weren't collecting debt, they were clearing land. And Marjorie, the woman running through rain clutching her granddaughter, was another piece of real estate to be extracted and discarded. Nathan ran a hand across his face, grounding himself. The thought of Hale marking neighborhoods like they were chess squares made something old inside Nathan flare. He remembered the house he grew up in. The echoes, the empty dinners, the loneliness. Losing a home wasn't always about walls or roofs. Sometimes it was losing the only ground where memories were still alive. He wouldn't let that happen to Marjorie. As he turned to leave, Leo added softly, "Hey, who's the woman?" Nathan paused. For a moment he didn't have an answer simple enough to give. Then someone who deserves better than this. On his way back to Beacon Suites his phone buzzed. Another message. Another number he didn't recognize. But the words were worse than the burn in his chest. "Back off, Ward, not your fight." Nathan stared at the message long enough to feel the old ache behind it. The ache he carried since childhood. The ache of being told to stay quiet, stay out, stay somewhere that didn't matter. He typed nothing back. He wouldn't waste breath on threats. He only pressed the accelerator a little harder. When he reached the suite, he found Marjorie sitting near the window while Kayla napped with her sunflower plush, her chest rising and falling in soft waves. Jack was stationed at the door. Hannah was adjusting the camera feed from the hallway. Marjorie turned as Nathan entered, her expression searching his face. "What did you find?" He sat down across from her. "Hale's using the jackals to force people from their homes," he said. "He wants your neighborhood, he wants leverage. And he wants you scared enough to give up everything." Marjorie's hands trembled. "Why us? Why my son?" "He didn't have anything. He had a house," Nathan answered softly, "and that's enough." For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the truth settle in her bones. It wasn't about debt, it wasn't about Jeremiah, it wasn't even about Kayla, it was about a group of men who believed they could take whatever they wanted because nobody would stop them. Marjorie whispered, "My boy died working night shifts to keep that house. They're not taking it." Nathan felt something tighten in his chest, a surge of respect, almost fierce. "They won't," he said. "Not while I'm on this." She studied him. "Why are you risking this, Nathan? This isn't your fight." His gaze flicked briefly to Kayla, then back to her. "Yes it is," he said. "When a system tries to crush people who can't fight back, somebody has to step in." There was something else layered under his words, something he didn't quite say, about his mother. About growing up in a home where help never came. About the boy who learned to be silent because silence was safer. But Marjorie saw it anyway. She was a mother, she recognized buried hurt when she saw it. Before she could respond, Hannah stepped forward. "We've got movement outside," she said quietly. "Jackals again." "Watching." Marjorie stiffened. Nathan didn't. He stood smoothly, the way someone does when they expected the threat all along. "Good," he said. "They're watching us. That means they aren't hurting someone else tonight." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Marjorie believed they had a chance, not because the danger was gone, but because someone finally stood with them. Someone who refused to look away. Nathan's next words were quiet. Controlled. The kind you speak when you're ready for the storm. It ends now. 3 days passed with the same strange rhythm: security rotations, cautious walks to and from the elevator, the constant hum of cameras checking every corner of Beacon Suites. Kayla began drawing again. Sunflowers, stick figures, little houses she remembered from before everything fell apart. Marjorie tried to act calm for her sake, but every time she glanced toward the window, she worried someone dangerous might be standing just beyond the frame. Nathan barely slept. He spent nights reviewing floor plans, talking to Carver, coordinating with Jack and Hannah, and refreshing a growing list of potential threats. The more he learned, the less the world felt like the safe place he once believed it could be. On the 4th morning, the air changed. Not a storm, not a sound, something quieter, heavier. A pressure that settled into the suite like a warning. Kayla had drawn a picture of a playground and was proudly holding it up when Hannah's voice cut through the room from the small earpiece Nathan wore. "Nathan, you need to see this." Her tone wasn't frantic, but it carried a sharpness he'd learned to read. He moved quickly to the hallway monitor. Jack was already there, pointing to the feed from the exterior camera. A man stood at the edge of the schoolyard fence, tall, hooded, leaning casually as if he belonged there. But he didn't belong anywhere near children. Even from the grainy footage, Nathan recognized the posture, the confidence, the smirk that hovered beneath the shadow of the hood. Leon Vance. Nathan didn't think, he reacted. "Stay with them," he told Jack. "Hannah, call the school. Lock down the perimeter. I'm heading there now." He grabbed his jacket, the keys, and the folder containing every piece of evidence he'd gathered. Marjorie stood in the living room with Kayla clinging to her leg, eyes wide and fearful. "What happened?" she asked. Nathan didn't sugarcoat it. "He's at her school." The moment he said it, Marjorie's breath cracked. Kayla's grip tightened around her grandmother's skirt. "I'm going with you," Marjorie said. "No," Nathan said firmly but softly. "You stay here. Jack and Hannah won't let anyone near you." There was fear in her eyes, fear mixed with something sharper, the instinct of a grandmother who had already lost too much. Nathan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I promise you she won't see him. Not today. Not ever again if I can help it." Nathan didn't wait for the elevator. He ran down the stairs, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off the metal railing like a countdown. Every second mattered, every breath felt too loud, too slow. The school was only 5 minutes away, but each red light stretched longer than it should, each turn felt steeper, each bump in the road carried weight. When he pulled into the lot, teachers were already herding children inside. One pointed toward the playground, panic in her eyes. "He was watching them," she said. "We called security. Where is he now?" Nathan cut in. The teacher pointed toward the far side of the fence. Nathan went still. The hooded figure was gone. But the feeling like static clinging to the air told him the encounter wasn't over. It had simply shifted. He approached the fence slowly, eyes scanning the sidewalk, the parked cars, the line of trees that bordered the edge of the school. The world felt too quiet, too staged, like the moment before something breaks. Then he saw it. A crumpled sunflower sticker on the ground, one identical to the set Kayla always carried in her small backpack. It wasn't hers, her stickers were safely zipped inside the suite, but the message behind it felt unmistakable. Leon wanted him to know he'd been close, close enough to touch the fence, close enough to touch a child who trusted Nathan. He picked up the sticker, his hand tightening until the edges dug into his palm. For a moment, everything inside him went silent, not calm, silent. A different kind of stillness, a dangerous one. A memory from his childhood surfaced, standing at his mother's funeral, staring at carnations he couldn't bring himself to hold, because they reminded him of everything he'd lost. Back then, he hadn't been able to protect her. But now he could protect someone else. He would. Nathan returned to Beacon Suites with a steadiness he didn't fully feel. Inside the suite, Kayla rushed to him instantly, her small arms wrapping around his legs. "Did you see him?" she whispered. Nathan crouched down to meet her eyes. "He didn't hurt anyone, and he won't." He lifted the sunflower sticker and placed it in her palm. "But I need you to stay inside with Grandma, and listen to Jack and Hannah every time they tell you something. Can you do that for me?" Kayla nodded, clutching the sticker like it was a charm that could keep the world in place. Marjorie stood by the window, her hands trembling, her face pale. Why is he doing this? Why won't he leave her alone? Nathan took a slow breath. He wanted to tell her the truth without feeding her fear. Because he thinks fear is leverage, and because he's backed by someone who wants your entire neighborhood cleared out. But Leon is not in charge of this story anymore. He straightened, his gaze sharpening. "We are." Jack stepped forward from the hallway. "There's movement outside again. Not Leon, someone else." Watching the building. Marjorie's eyes filled with panic. Nathan's jaw set in place. "Hale's people," he said quietly. "He's escalating." Hannah adjusted the monitor on the table. "I can give you a 30-second delay warning if anyone approaches the suite doors. But we need a plan. A real one. This isn't just intimidation anymore." Nathan nodded. "I know." He moved to the table, spreading out papers, financial records, land deeds, timestamps of every Red Jackal's appearance in the area. "Carver found the connection," he said. "This entire neighborhood, Marjorie's block, is part of a redevelopment deal. Hale is funneling through a shell company. He needs the houses emptied. Leon is just the tool he uses to apply pressure." Marjorie stared at him, shocked. "They killed my boy, to buy our homes." Nathan met her eyes, and in them she saw not anger, something stronger. Resolve, A resolve that came from the part of him he never talked about, the part shaped by loss, by silence, by growing up without someone stepping in. They took everything from your son, Nathan said, and they think they can take you next. But they won't. I'm not letting them. The words hung in the air with a certain weight. Kayla climbed onto the couch, listening quietly, her small hand still holding the sunflower sticker. She watched Nathan like she believed he could move mountains if he tried hard enough. Jack approached the window. Nathan, look, another figure outside, another sign that this nightmare wasn't slowing down. Nathan didn't hesitate. Call the police, call Carver, and get Hale's file ready. Hannah stepped forward. What are you going to do? He looked at them, at Marjorie, trembling but fierce, at Kayla clutching hope in the shape of a sunflower, at the two security workers, who had become his anchors. I'm going to make sure they know we're not running, he said. Not anymore. And behind those words, something deeper pulsed, something he hadn't said aloud yet. This wasn't just protection, it was personal. A chance to stand where nobody had stood for him. A chance to rewrite a story that once ended in silence. Marjorie watched him, finally understanding that this young man didn't merely step into their lives, he stepped into a fight he'd been carrying, long before he met them. And now they were fighting it together. The hours after Leon's appearance at the school felt like the world had shifted on its axis. The air inside Beacon Suites had changed, sharper, more charged, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something heavier than the danger already outside. Nathan sensed it too. He kept his phone in his hand, pacing the length of the suite, while Kayla napped on the couch with Marjorie's sweater wrapped around her small shoulders. Carver called just after noon. Her voice carried a weight that made Nathan step away from the window. I found what you asked for, she said. And you're not going to like it. He didn't sit down. Tell me. There's a connection, she said, between the shell companies buying out the houses and Hale's investment group. And there's a direct trail tying them to payments made to Red Jackals. Nathan clenched his jaw. How direct? Direct enough that a prosecutor could move on this, Carver replied. But it's fragile, one wrong move, and Hale buries it. He's protected by 3 layers of legal insulation. If we want a chance at taking him down, we need more than paperwork, we need people willing to speak. He understood immediately. She meant Marjorie. She meant others like her. He stayed silent long enough that Carver added softly, you weren't wrong about Hale, he's been doing this for a long time. And he's done worse than intimidation. Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Worse how? She hesitated. Nathan, he's tied to 2 disappearances, witnesses who tried to stop him. Both cases went nowhere. Nathan let the words wash over him. He dealt with cruelty before. But this was machinery, calculated, structured, polished for profit. The type of cruelty that hid behind boardrooms and charity galas. He ended the call with instructions to organize a meeting with police oversight. As soon as he hung up, his phone buzzed again, this time with a live feed from Hannah's security scanner. A notification pulsed across the screen, unknown vehicles circling the block. Third pass. Nathan turned to Jack. Stay with them, don't let anyone near the door. Jack nodded once. Nathan slipped the phone into his pocket and left for the meeting with a determination that pulled his shoulders straight. The precinct conference room felt colder than he expected. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and a long metal table stretched across the room like a line on a battlefield. Across it sat 2 detectives, Rodriguez and Kemp, both of whom Nathan had worked with on community cases before. They usually greeted him with respect, sometimes even warmth. Today their expressions were more guarded. Rodriguez placed the file Carver had compiled onto the table. You've stirred something big, she said. Nathan didn't flinch. I'm not stirring anything, I'm stopping something. Kemp leaned back, arms crossed. Hale has friends in high places. If we go after him, we need airtight evidence, and we need leverage. Nathan opened the folder with the calm of someone fighting to hold himself together. There's enough here to expose the lending ring. Enough to tie him to extortion. Enough for a warrant. A warrant. Yes, Rodriguez said. A conviction. not yet. She sighed. We need testimony. We need the victims to speak. Nathan's stomach tightened. He knew what she was asking. He knew what it meant to ask a woman who had already lost her son to stand against the men who killed him. She'll talk, Nathan said quietly. Rodriguez hesitated. Are you sure? He looked up, and there was no wavering in his voice. She's stronger than she realizes, and she's not alone. While they talked, something else was happening back at Beacon Suites. Marjorie stood near the window, the phone pressed to her ear, listening to Carver's voice explain the same thing she'd just told Nathan. Listening to words like testify and case building and chance to end this, and for a long moment she said nothing. Kayla wandered over on sleepy feet, tugging at her grandmother's sleeve. Grandma, what's wrong? Marjorie knelt, smoothing Kayla's hair back gently. They want me to tell the truth about the bad men, she said softly. Kayla nodded, as if this were obvious. Then tell them, so they go away. The simplicity of a child's trust settled over Marjorie, like a hand on her back, steadying her. She realized she wasn't trembling anymore. Nathan returned to the suite an hour later. When he walked in, he found Marjorie standing in the center of the room, not fearful, not fragile, but anchored. Something resolute had taken root in her posture. I'll do it, she said before he could speak. He paused. Carver called you. She told me everything. Nathan studied her carefully, not wanting pressure to force her decision. You don't have to. I do, she interrupted, and her voice didn't shake. If I stay quiet, they win. They took my son. I won't let them take our home. I won't let them take her childhood. Nathan exhaled slowly. A quiet pride stirred in his chest, not the loud, triumphant kind, but the type that made a person's throat tighten unexpectedly. Then we're doing this together, he said. It wasn't a promise made lightly. It wasn't a promise made for heroism. It was a promise that came from someplace deeper, somewhere in him that recognized the weight of silence, the cost of loss, the ache of having no one step into the fire beside him. The following morning, the precinct conference room filled again, this time with the weight of opposing forces. Nathan sat beside Marjorie, his presence steady and grounding. Jack stood near the wall. Hannah monitored devices from her phone. Across from them sat Leon Vance, handcuffed, flanked by two officers. His smirk was gone. His eyes still held arrogance, but there was something frayed behind them now, a crack in the confidence he once strutted around with. Next to him sat a lawyer hired by Hale, a man with a polished suit and a reptilian calm. Marjorie felt her breath wobble, but then Nathan placed a gentle hand over hers. She steadied. They began the session. Officers presented the data. Carver added her analysis. Patterns and transactions filled the screens, each one linking Hale Empire to the Jackals. And then Rodriguez turned toward Marjorie. Mrs. Smith, she said gently, tell us what happened to your son. The room seemed to exhale. Marjorie's voice was soft at first, but each sentence gained strength. She spoke about Jeremiah's shifts, the debt, the threats, the night she found his body after the accident. She spoke about Kayla's fear. She spoke about the night in the rain, the footsteps, the voices, the rage. Every word felt like a wound reopening. But every word also felt like a blade cutting through the darkness these men had created. When she finished, silence filled the room. Leon shifted, his jaw twitching. For a moment he looked almost human, almost as if guilt flickered beneath the surface. But then he glanced at Hale's lawyer, and masked himself again. It didn't matter. Marjorie had already reclaimed what fear tried to steal. Rodriguez turned to Nathan. You said you had something else. Nathan reached into his folder and placed a printed transcript onto the table. It was the burner phone message Hale's men had sent. Threatening Kayla, threatening a child. Rodriguez's eyes hardened. Kemp nodded. That's enough, he said. We're moving forward. The lawyer protested, but it didn't matter anymore. The tide had turned. As Nathan escorted Marjorie out of the room, she paused in the hallway and looked up at him. You saved us, she whispered. He shook his head softly. No, you saved yourself. I just stood with you. And for a moment, just a moment, He felt something inside himself ease, something that had been locked tight since childhood. Someone finally believed in him too. The days after the precinct meeting moved strangely, as if time itself had softened. The immediate danger had not vanished, but something inside the Beacon suite felt warmer, like sunlight trying to break through heavy clouds. Kayla drew more now, filling pages with suns and stick figures holding hands, and each time she handed a picture to Nathan, he found himself holding it with a care he didn't fully understand. Nathan visited every morning, sometimes with breakfast, sometimes with nothing but his quiet presence. Kayla always seemed to sense when he entered the room. Her head would lift, her eyes widening, with the same trust reserved for someone safe, someone steady. One morning, she ran to him with a drawing, 3 figures under a yellow sun, and pointed to each one with the tiny confidence of a child who believed the world could be arranged if she just explained it carefully. "That's Grandma," she said. "That's me." She tapped the 3rd figure, a tall shape with square shoulders and a messy scribble of brown hair. "And that's you." Nathan stared at the picture longer than he meant to. The lines were simple, childlike. Yet something about seeing himself drawn into a family he didn't belong to sent a quiet ache through his chest. A longing he hadn't expected. "You drew me taller than everyone," he said, trying to keep his voice light. Kayla nodded matter-of-factly. "Because you keep us safe." Marjorie watched the exchange from the kitchen counter, drying dishes with slow, deliberate movements. She studied Nathan's face with the perceptiveness of someone who had raised children and lost children, someone who understood that strength often hid small, fragile pieces beneath it. "You're good with her," she said when he sat down. Nathan glanced up, surprised. "Kids like honesty, and you give her that." Marjorie replied, "Not everyone does." There was a moment, small, nearly invisible, where Nathan looked away as if the compliment brushed against a part of him that had been closed for years. "My father wasn't good at that," he said quietly. "After my mother died, there wasn't much truth left in the house, just silence." Marjorie softened. No child should grow up in silence. He said nothing, but she could see the memories pressing against him, reshaping the posture of his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. He didn't cry, he didn't break. He just let her words land, like someone hearing an echo of the childhood he never had. Later that afternoon, Kayla insisted he join her on the floor to build a tower from mismatched blocks. Nathan tried to maintain the distance he believed was wise, but Kayla ignored the invisible boundaries he drew around himself. When the tower collapsed, she burst into laughter and leaned into him, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. Nathan froze, not from discomfort, but from a strange warmth spreading through him. A warmth that reminded him of being held once long ago by a mother whose memory had blurred into soft edges and forgotten lullabies. Marjorie was watching again, and this time she smiled to herself, not a smile of amusement, but one of recognition. She saw the way Nathan steadied Kayla's small hands, the way he softened when he spoke to her, the way he touched the world more gently when Kayla was in it. "You know," Marjorie said that evening, while Kayla slept curled on the couch, "God sends people at strange times." Nathan shook his head, still staring at the sleeping child. "I'm not holy enough for that." "That's not what I mean," she said. "Some people are sent to finish something, some to protect, and some." She let the sentence linger, long enough that Nathan finally looked at her. "Some to heal." He didn't know how to respond. Something in the room shifted, soft, emotional, unspoken. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't forced. It was the beginning of something familial, something that formed slowly, like warmth spreading through cold hands. He cleared his throat. "You're stronger than anyone I've met." Marjorie chuckled softly. "Strength is just a woman learning to survive when she gets no choice." "You shouldn't have had to survive alone," Nathan said. "And you shouldn't have had to grow up alone," she replied. Their eyes met, and for a moment, past and present braided together. That night, Nathan stayed late, reviewing security protocols with Jack and Hannah. Kayla woke from a nap, rubbing her eyes, and wandered toward him. Without a word, she climbed into his lap, resting her head against his chest. Nathan hesitated, just for a breath,
then wrapped a careful arm around her. Kayla whispered, "Are you leaving?" Nathan swallowed. "Not tonight." She closed her eyes again, trusting him without hesitation. The weight of her small body, the steady warmth against him, stirred something deep, an echo of a memory he didn't realize he'd been craving. When she fell asleep again, Marjorie approached quietly. "You don't have to pretend you're made of steel," she said gently. Nathan exhaled, not quite a sigh, but something close, something that carried years of unspoken grief. "I don't know how to be anything else." Marjorie touched his shoulder, a brief grounding gesture. "Families teach you that, whether they're blood or not." Her words hit him with the force of realization more than comfort. Because he was beginning to understand something, this wasn't just about protecting two people anymore. This was about belonging, about healing what had been broken in him long before he met them. The days continued unfolding gently. Nathan taught Kayla how to fold paper airplanes. Kayla insisted he sit next to her during meals. Marjorie cooked food she hadn't cooked since Jeremiah was alive, placing plates in front of Nathan with the unspoken expectation that he would eat until she told him to stop. Every evening, Nathan found himself lingering longer, staying through bedtime stories or late-night worries. Every morning, he showed up before being asked, and somewhere between the laughter, the shared meals, the steady presence in the small warm suite, Nathan realized something quietly profound. He wasn't visiting anymore. He was returning. Marjorie realized it too when she watched him pick up Kayla after she tripped over her crayons and comfort her with a gentleness she didn't know he possessed. She whispered to herself, "He needed us as much as we needed him." Later that night, when Nathan stepped into the hallway, after checking the locks, Kayla toddled over and handed him a new drawing. This time, the figures weren't stick shapes. They had smiles, they held hands, and at the top, in uneven crayon letters, she had written, "Our people." He stared at the page long enough that emotion pricked at his throat. He crouched down, smoothing her hair. "Thank you," he said softly. Kayla looked at him with simple, innocent certainty. "You're part of us." And in that moment, quiet, warm, almost small, Nathan felt something inside him finally loosen. For the first time since childhood, he didn't feel like an outsider in his own life. He felt connected. The bond wasn't spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. It lived in shared moments, in quiet safety, in the space between fear and comfort. It grew in the way Kayla trusted him, in the way Marjorie steadied him, in the way he found himself wanting to stay. It was not a traditional family, but it was becoming one just the same. The days following the major arrests carried a strange, suspended stillness, like the world was finally exhaling after months of holding its breath. But for Marjorie, the quiet didn't feel peaceful at first. It felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous, because for so long, safety had never lasted more than a moment. She kept expecting another knock on the door, another threat, another reminder that danger had a way of creeping back when she least expected it. Nathan saw that worry in her eyes before she even spoke it. He'd spent enough of his life hiding his own fears to recognize when someone else was doing the same. "We're not done yet," he told her gently one morning in the Beacon Suites living room. "But we're finishing this, completely." Completely. The word carried weight, the kind she hadn't dared believe in for years. That afternoon Nathan met with the lead attorney Sandra Phoenix, a sharp-minded woman with a quiet confidence that always made people underestimate her. She slid a folder toward him. "This is everything we need to finalize the protection orders," she said. "And to secure restitution for Marjorie." "Restitution?" Nathan asked. Sandra nodded. "The court is considering wiping the debt entirely and compensating her for the illegal interest they tried to collect." For a moment Nathan was so stunned he didn't speak. He thought of all the nights Marjorie had sat awake worrying about numbers no one should have had to carry. The idea of lifting that weight felt like watching a chain snap open. When he returned to the suite that evening, Marjorie was folding laundry by the window, Kayla coloring nearby. He placed the folder on the table. "They're voiding the debt," he said simply. Marjorie froze. Her hands trembled, one of Kayla's tiny socks held halfway between basket and table. "All of it?" "All," he confirmed. "And they're considering damages."
Marjorie pressed a hand to her chest, lowering herself slowly onto the sofa. She didn't cry, not at first. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Then finally her eyes filled. It wasn't the messy, broken crying of fear, it was the soft crying of a woman who had held on for too long and was finally being told she could rest. Kayla climbed onto her grandmother's lap, confused but worried. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Marjorie kissed her forehead. "Baby, nothing's wrong. Nothing at all." Nathan stepped back, giving them space, but Marjorie reached out and caught his hand. "You made this possible." He shook his head. "No, you survived long enough to reach it. I just helped clear the path." For the first time, Marjorie believed that might actually be true. 2 days later the courthouse was crowded, reporters milling outside like bees drawn to the scent of scandal. Nathan had warned Marjorie that there might be attention. Morgan Hale being arrested had sent waves through the city's upper circles, but he stayed beside her the whole time, his calm presence grounding her. Inside, the judge read through the charges with clinical precision. Leon Vance sat shackled at the defense table, his usual bravado drained from him like someone had finally switched off the swagger he wore like armor. He didn't look back at Marjorie. He didn't dare. Morgan Hale, on the other hand, lifted his chin defiantly, as if pretending this was merely an inconvenience. His lawyers whispered urgently to him, but Hale's eyes kept drifting toward Nathan, filled with a bitter, icy resentment. When the judge listed Hale's offenses: financial fraud, predatory lending, racketeering, Hale scoffed under his breath. Right up until the judge announced, "Bail is denied. Sentence recommendation 14 years with forfeiture of assets." A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. Even Hale's attorneys stiffened. Nathan watched the moment Hale realized he wasn't untouchable after all. The realization hit him slowly, bitterness turning to fear, fear turning to something like disbelief. Outside the courtroom, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. Nathan shielded Marjorie with his arm, guiding her swiftly through the crowd. But one reporter, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice trained to cut through chaos, called out, "Mr. Ward, is it true you personally financed the investigation that exposed Hale's operation?" Nathan paused. He didn't want attention. He didn't want praise, but he also didn't want the narrative twisted. "I helped a woman who deserved protection," he answered calmly. "The rest was justice doing its job." Marjorie looked up at him, surprised by the simplicity of his answer. No speeches. No spotlight, just truth. When they reached the car, she said quietly, "Your mother would have been proud." Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. For years that word mother had been too heavy to carry, but somehow hearing Marjorie say it felt different. It didn't reopen an old wound, it softened it. "I hope so," he said. The official paperwork arrived the next morning. A thick envelope, stamped and sealed. Nathan placed it gently in Marjorie's hands. She opened it slowly, reading each line, her lips moving silently. Confirmation of the voided debt, confirmation of the illegal charges, confirmation of damages awarded, confirmation that she and Kayla were now enrolled in the Witness Protection Support Program, secure housing, relocation options, long-term assistance. It was more than victory. It was freedom. But the line that made her chest tighten the most was the simplest primary threat neutralized. Nathan stood nearby, not wanting to intrude, but unable to look away. When she finally looked up, her eyes were clear, not frightened, not clouded, not hesitant, clear. "I've been waiting for this day for years," she said. Nathan nodded. "You earned it." Kayla ran into the room, still in her pajamas, holding a crayon drawing. "Grandma, I made you something." Marjorie unfolded the paper. 3 smiling figures, drawn with bright, joyful colors. Herself, Kayla, and Nathan. Above them, in wobbly handwriting, "Safe now." Marjorie touched the word with her fingertip, her throat tightening. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "We are." And for the first time, Nathan allowed himself a long exhale. The kind a man takes when he realizes he doesn't have to stand guard every second. The kind he hadn't felt since childhood. That night, Nathan lingered by the Beacon Suite door a little longer than usual. He checked the locks even though he knew they were secure. He walked the hallway even though the guards already had it covered. He returned to the suite one last time just to make sure the windows were properly sealed. Marjorie watched him with gentle amusement. "Nathan, we're safe," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "It's just today felt like a door finally closing." It did, she agreed. But it also opened another. He didn't ask what she meant. Something in her tone told him he already knew. Something about the way Kayla looked at him when he tucked her into bed. Something about the way this small wounded family had woven itself around him without ever asking for anything in return. For a man who'd spent years believing he wasn't built for attachment, it was startling to discover how natural it suddenly felt. Marjorie stepped closer, studying him with a kindness he wasn't used to receiving. "Nathan, thank you for helping us finish the fight." He shook his head slowly. "You finished it. I just stood with you." She gave him a long searching look. "You did more than stand with us." A pause, warm and heavy. "You stood for us." Nathan swallowed, caught off guard by how deeply those words landed. "I'm not going anywhere," he said before he could stop himself. Marjorie smiled. "I know," and as he stepped out into the quiet hallway, past the guards and the dim lights and the now silent fear, Nathan realized something he hadn't fully understood until that moment. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. Sometimes, justice was about giving someone back the life they were told they didn't deserve. And tonight, that life had finally returned to Marjorie and Kayla. Tomorrow, it would begin to bloom. The snow had finally melted from the rooftops by the time life began to stitch itself back into something resembling normal. For weeks the threat had hung over them like a storm cloud. But now, with the court rulings behind them and the danger sealed away in iron bars, a new rhythm began to form. Not rushed, not forced, just real. Nathan didn't plan it. He didn't stand in front of a mirror and decide, "Today I become part of a family." It happened in tiny, almost invisible ways. Small stitches pulled tight in the fabric of their days until one morning he looked up and realized he was no longer standing at the edge of their lives, but woven firmly into the center. It started with breakfast. Marjorie had insisted on cooking, though she claimed she was out of practice, a statement Nathan immediately recognized as a lie, when the smell of her slow-cooked butter grits filled the beacon-sweet kitchen. He stood awkwardly at the counter, watching her move with an ease that felt like watching someone dance, a slow rhythm passed down through generations. "You ever eaten real grits, Nathan?" she asked without looking at him. He hesitated. "Not like that, no." "Mum, thought so." She slid a bowl toward him. "Sit, eat." He obeyed like it was the most natural order he'd ever been given. Kayla climbed onto the chair beside him, swinging her feet back and forth, humming to herself as she spooned berries into her bowl. When she caught Nathan watching her, she grinned, wide, toothy, unfiltered joy, and something warm bloomed in Nathan's chest. It was the first morning in years he'd eaten with other people. The first morning in even longer that he didn't feel the urge to rush away. The next sign came in the shape of a broken toy. Kayla's stuffed-footed unicorn lost a button eye during an energetic game of superhero hospital. She held it by the tail, devastated, as if the world had cracked open. "My unicorn is blind now," she sniffed. Nathan knelt in front of her, studying the lopsided face. "We can fix it. You know how." "No," he admitted, "but I can learn." He spent 20 minutes on the internet, another 10 finding a sewing kit, and the next 20 stitching in silence while Kayla sat cross-legged beside him, watching each movement like he was performing open-heart surgery. When the eye was finally secured, she squealed and threw her arms around his neck so suddenly he almost lost his balance. "You saved her." Her warmth pressed against his chest, small arms squeezing tight. He froze for half a second, old instincts bracing for a kind of touch he didn't understand. Then something inside him eased slowly, unraveling a knot he'd carried since childhood. "No," he said softly, holding her steady. "You saved her. I just used the needle." Marjorie watched from the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed, a knowing smile pulling at her lips. Other moments followed, little pieces of domestic life Nathan hadn't realized he'd been starving for. He helped Kayla draw planets on poster board for her preschool presentation. He carried groceries for Marjorie without being asked, fussing over her when she waved him off. He learned how she liked her tea brewed, how she folded laundry, how she hummed gospel under her breath when she was deep in thought. And every time he showed up, every small steady act, something shifted. Not in a grand cinematic way, but in the quiet places where real bonds take root. One Saturday afternoon, Marjorie convinced him to accompany them to the local flea market.
The place was loud, chaotic, overflowing with folding tables covered in handmade crafts and knockoff sneakers. Kayla raced ahead, her laughter echoing between stalls. Nathan trailed beside Marjorie, hands in his pockets, quietly scanning the crowd out of old habit. She noticed. "You can breathe, you know," she murmured. He exhaled. "Force of habit. Baby, the only thing chasing us today is Kayla's energy, and you'll lose that race every time." Her teasing made him chuckle, a sound that startled even him. It had been so long since laughter had felt natural. At one stall, Kayla held up a tiny hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Home is who you're with." "You want that one pumpkin?" Marjorie asked. Kayla shook her head and turned to Nathan. "It's for you." He blinked. "For me?" She nodded with conviction, pressing it into his hands. "'Cause you're with us." For a moment Nathan couldn't speak. The words blurred, the edges of the world softened. He swallowed hard and ruffled Kayla's hair to hide the emotion threatening to crack through. Marjorie saw anyway, but the moment that sealed everything didn't happen in a market or a hotel suite. It happened in the quiet, late one night, when the world felt small and safe. Marjorie was sorting through a box of old family photos, Jeremiah as a boy, her late husband, snapshots from Christmases long past. Kayla slept in the next room, her nightlight casting gentle shadows across the hallway. Nathan sat on the couch, flipping through documents for the foundation, but his attention drifted as Marjorie pulled out a faded picture of Jeremiah holding baby Kayla. "He tried so hard," she whispered. "Even when the world kept kicking him down, he kept trying." Nathan looked at the photo, a young man exhausted but proud, hope lingering in his smile. A man who didn't get the chance to fix the mistakes life dealt him. Marjorie's voice trembled. "Sometimes I worry she won't remember him. That she'll only remember the fear and the running." Nathan reached over, gently taking the photo. His fingers brushed hers, light, steady, careful. "She'll remember the love," he said. "Because you kept it alive." Her eyes lifted, shimmering with something deeper than gratitude. "You know, Jeremiah was the kind of man who would have given anything for his daughter. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like someone's looking out for her the way he would have wanted." Nathan swallowed, caught between humility and something heavier. "She deserves that," he murmured. "You do too," she replied, quietly. The room went still. Then she said something so soft it almost disappeared into the air. "You remind me of family." The words hit him with a force he didn't expect. Family, something he had watched from a distance his entire life, something he'd convinced himself he wasn't meant to belong to. His voice broke on the way out. "I never really had one." Marjorie reached over, warm and steady, placing her hand over his. "You do now." That was the moment. Not the courtroom victory, not the arrests, not the financial restitution. This quiet, gentle claiming, the kind that didn't demand anything from him. The kind that didn't judge the rough edges he carried. The kind that filled a space inside him he had thought was permanently hollow. Later that night, Kayla padded into the living room half asleep, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep," she mumbled. Nathan crouched beside her. "Want me to read to you?" She nodded, slipping her small hand into his without hesitation. As he walked her to bed, Marjorie watched them disappear down the hallway, one tall figure, one tiny figure, fingers intertwined. And she knew, he wasn't just helping them anymore. He wasn't just protecting them. He wasn't even just staying. He belonged. Not by blood, not by obligation, by choice, by heart, by something stronger than either of those. A family, formed not by tragedy but by the healing that followed. A family stitched together in a hotel suite, a courthouse, a playground, a kitchen, piece by piece, moment by moment, found family, chosen family, the kind that holds, and for the first time in years, all three of them slept without fear, together.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.